Hello, my name is AJ Bhakta, and I am a USB student taking a late antiquity class, and this is my final slash a podcast discussing the persecution of various religious groups during the time of Roman late antiquity. Uh, Today I plan on discussing the persecution of Christians and pagans, and depending on time, I might even talk about Jews. So before we can start, we gotta discuss a couple definitions. So first we gotta discuss what is late antiquity. So late antiquity is the years between 284 to 700 AD if you use Google's basic definition. We are also going to have to discuss the terms monotheism and polytheism. So generally, when I was growing up, I was told monotheism is just belief in like one god, and polytheism is a belief in multiple gods, which is a correct definition. But to get more precise in how I thought about or how Romans thought about it, so a Roman might think, oh, so my God's real. However, if someone else comes believing in a different God, they would also accept the fact that their God's real. So that would be polytheism, versus I always thought polytheism is just a religion that had a bunch of gods. Monotheism, in terms of Roman sense, would say that my religion only has one God, and every other religion's God's not real. So weirdly enough, the first group we have to talk about being persecuted is Christians, which, generally speaking, you think through history are usually the group persecuting people, or at least from what I was taught. But in this case, during the time, or very start of late antiquity, they were having a rough go at things. A lot of people didn't like them, and a lot of people didn't like them before even the start of late antiquity. It's just usually it wasn't state-sponsored, except for a few exceptions, like Nero blaming Christians for a fire, things like that. But at the very start of late antiquity, there was a emperor known as Diocletian who decided to persecute the Christians. So Diocletian was the leader of Rome from 284 AD to 305 AD, and he had pretty much disliked Christians his whole life, as he believed in paganism as the true religion, and he wanted to unite all of Rome using the beliefs that he believed to be most Roman. And so Diocletian set up a series of laws that persecuted the Christians. For instance, he made all military members have to make public sacrifice, which was important because Christians didn't like to make sacrifice. He burned Christian groups like the Manichaeans, and of course, killed them and burned down their books. He himself burned down a church and absolutely looted the place. He made an edict that there should be no assembly of Christians, and all people of power who were Christian had their powers taken away. So, for instance, if you were a politician, you no longer got your place, or if you were in the military, you never got your place. Christians oftentimes had their property taken. They couldn't attest in court. A lot of times they were tortured. And generally speaking, if you did anything illegal to a Christian, you would not be legally persecuted. So why did people dislike Christians? That's a very wide answer. So part of the answer is because they were monotheistic, meaning they didn't believe that anybody else's God really existed, and so their religion didn't line up with Roman state views. They also met in a lot of illegal assemblies. They refused to do sacrifices. Many times they refused to serve in the military, even though there was some exceptions to that rule. Jesus was a real person who didn't necessarily portray Rome in the best of lights. Some people believe that they were cannibals. I do think it is important to note that this persecution wasn't countrywide, and also that in general Romans were actually pretty tolerant of other religions, given they were polytheistic, so they believed in most people's religions were valid. They even made exceptions for Jews, because Jews are kind of an ancient religion. One particular story to show you how Diocletian treated Christian groups. So in Antioch in 302, they were having sacrifice, and this man named Romanus, sorry if I mispronounced that name, stopped the sacrifice to tell them that Christian gods were the true gods. And so Galerius said, all right, we should burn this man alive. And Romanus, or Diocletian, hating Christians so much, instead of having him burned alive, which already is a painful death enough, had Romanus' tongue cut out and then was beaten and tortured to death. So during the time of the late antiquity, I would argue that Nicene Christianity was the most common religion. So how do we go from Christians being persecuted and an emperor absolutely hating them to it being the most common religion, you may be asking? So it all starts with this man named Constantine. So once Diocletian retired, there was a battle to see who was going to be emperor because they didn't have a very stable send-off. And so Constantine was one of the contenders, and so there's this really famous story that he actually tells himself of him converting to Christianity. So he was off to go fight one of his rivals, Maxidius, in Rome, and this takes place at the Battle of Milvian Bridge. And so the night before, he claims that he had a dream or a vision, where up at the sun there's a cross with this item called a Cairo, which supposedly he painted on all the shields, and underneath that it said, "By this conquer." So he took it as a symbol that he was Christianity was leading him to victory. Luckily for Constantine, Maxentius kind of had a stupid military plan for the situation. So his plan was he was going to set up his troops right in front of the river, which I'm no military expert, but I know this was a stupid plan, because if you start to lose the battle, there's nowhere to retreat to because you'll simply drown in the river. Once Constantine becomes leader and he's converted to Christianity, it makes it kind of hard to persecute Christians. He immediately legalizes Christianity, so that's no longer a problem. So he did make the Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity. However, his conversion to Christianity just seems kind of weird because he claimed to have a vision. And he also seemed to be a very big fanboy for the pagan god Sol, which is the sun god. And just 2 years prior to him winning the battle, he had claimed that the sun god Apollo had blessed him and said he would rule the world. He also made the coins for Rome have the sun god Sol on it, and he also made a statue in the capital have a statue of the sun god Sol. He also chose not to be baptized till he was on his deathbed. Furthermore, he had spent the vast majority of his life as a pagan, so it seemed the conversion was just kind of odd, and a lot of people like to make theories as to was there a different reason than what he claimed for him to change to Christianity. And at the end of the day, we'll never truly know his motives because we can't be in his brain, so we're kind of left just having to believe that he had a vision. So now that Constantine is emperor and he's Christian, many pagans begin to convert to Christianity. Now, there still is plenty of pagans that existed in the Roman Empire, but Christianity became wildly more accepted and eventually will begin to dominate as pagans begin to be persecuted. But before we get to that, we have to discuss a controversy that happened with Christianity in Rome. So, during Constantine's rule, in the city of Alexandria, there was a priest named Arius. So Arius taught that Jesus was separate from God. The Son is separate from God, and that differed from normal or proper Christianity that was taught at the time, which was that the Son, the God, and the Holy Spirit are all the same thing. So Arius' beliefs began to spread throughout all of Rome, which started infighting, which Constantine quite hated, as he was very sympathetic to the Christian movement. So in 325, he started a Council of Nicaea. So the Council of Nicaea pretty much came together, and their job was to decide what official Christianity was going to believe in, which was that the Son and God were the same thing. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is even though the Council of Nicaea came together and decided this, Arianism still continued to spread throughout all Rome. Many people still believed in it, but as a result, Arianism Christians began to get persecuted as well. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, we can discuss the persecution of pagans and Jews. So once Constantine passes away, his son becomes in charge, Constantius II. So Constantius II maybe wasn't the all-time hardest on pagans, but he certainly wasn't light on punishing them. So in 341, he made a declaration that pagans weren't allowed to make sacrifices to their gods anymore, and anyone who did should be put to the sword. They also had some of their property taken away. And then later in 346, he said that all pagan temples should be taken down. Now, he wasn't someone who went around destroying a bunch of pagan temples, but certainly if anyone destroyed a pagan temple, he didn't really complain about it. The next Roman emperor I would like to talk about is Theodosius the Great. So he's most known for making Nicene Christianity the official state religion of Rome. And then he also did a bunch of god-awful things to the pagans. So as you can imagine, the persecution of Christians at this point was just totally over. I mean, it's the official state religion. The leaders have been Christian ever since Constantine and pretty much remained Christian through the entirety of the late antiquity. He also banned pagan sacrifice. He banned pagan rituals from the Olympics. He pretty much punished any kind of Roman pagan or Hellenistic culture and Arianism. Man was full on just Christianity is the way, it's the only way. And so as you can see, Rome has quickly become a dangerous environment for anyone who isn't solely just a Christian. Now, despite these decrees, paganism obviously survived for a very long time past this. And so you might be asking, why is that? So, just because an emperor puts a law in place doesn't mean it was necessarily enforced. So with the lack of communication, and it takes a long time. Rome was a very large empire. It takes a long time to communicate throughout due to limited technology. The political system at the time allowed for local officials to choose what laws to follow and what not to. So commonly, Roman officials decided not to follow up on the persecution of pagans, as they oftentimes lived in peace. But you don't often learn about that because that's not exactly headline news. No one likes to learn about peaceful times. They'd much rather talk about all the bad things that happen to a certain group. There also seems to be somewhat of a double standard on who the anti-pagan laws actually apply to, and this is partly due to the separate empires. But so a group called the Franks, which is a Germanic tribe, which Germanic tribes quite often invade Rome, many times successful during the time of the late antiquity. But the Franks move into a northern part of Rome, to a place called Gaul. And so the Franks are a paganistic group who pretty much never get in trouble for being pagans. So to clarify, they made a treaty that allowed them to just stay there in Gaul, even though it was Roman territory and they were a separate kingdom, as long as they had troops fight in the military for Rome. And the Franks do eventually convert to Christianity, but far later than them settling in, because they settled in pretty much towards the very beginning of the late antiquity, and they don't begin converting until King Clovis comes into power, which King Clovis didn't convert to Christianity till 508 AD. So now we gotta skip ahead a little bit and talk about an emperor called Justinian. So Justinian was in charge in the years 527 AD to 565 AD. So why am I skipping ahead? Well, back when Diocletian was in charge, the Roman Empire had gone separated into eastern and western halves, and the western half had fallen, leaving the eastern half, which was also called the Byzantine Empire. Now, what had conquered the western half was Germanic tribes. Germanic tribes were often either pagan or believed in Arian Christianity. Justinian didn't like this, as Justinian wanted to bring Rome back to its former glory, which meant conquering much of the western half. And Justinian was a believer that church and state was codependent. To give an exact quote of his, "There are two great gifts which God in his love for man has granted from on high, the priesthood and the imperial dignity. The first serves divine things, while the latter directs and administrates human affairs. Both, however, proceed from the same origin and endure the life of mankind. So with Justinian wanting to bring Rome back to its former glory, he wanted to bring it back to, he had to bring religion back to what he believed to be truly Roman religion, which in this case would be Nicene Christianity. Justinian wanted to punish anything he defined as heresy, which heresy is pretty much any belief that isn't just Nicene Christianity. So he closed down a Neoplatonic academy back in 529 AD because he didn't want paganism growing anymore, and he sought to destroy paganism even in people's private lives. It's not that he just didn't want it in public, he didn't even want it in people's private lives. Justinian pretty much sought to convert anyone he could to Christianity. He even actively interfered with other religions. He interfered with synagogues, even other forms of Christianity they didn't like were often exiled. So he was actually quite successful at doing these kind of things, as Justinian was a very powerful ruler, and he actually took back much of the western part of the Roman Empire. Now, the problem was he spread his troops too thin, he had a lot of catastrophes, and eventually all this stuff got reconquered by Germanic tribes, but he was quite successful this time. So I would like to go on and talk way more, because originally when I was planning this project out, I planned on doing for a 50-minute podcast, but I was kindly asked to not do such and to keep this between 15 and 20 minutes, which we're at that mark in 16 minutes. I'm really bad with outros, but here we are, I guess, the end. As you can clearly see, the Christians and pagans and various other groups are persecuted throughout Roman history. It's fairly unfortunate. Nicene Christianity ultimately ruled due to Constantine eventually converting to Christianity, the Council of Nicaea deciding the formal form of Christianity should be Nicaea Christianity, and the vast majority, if not all, rulers after that sticking with that. Alright, hope you all have a good day. Bye.